Now, residents in border communities between Nigeria and Niger remain in fear as tensions rise between the neighboring nations over allegations of plans to destabilize Niger. Niger's military junta has accused Nigeria of backing France in efforts to undermine its sovereignty, intensifying regional diplomatic strain. In response, Nigeria has dismissed the claims as baseless and a deliberate attempt at blackmail. Nigeria's Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, described the allegations as non-existent and doomed to fail. Despite the war of words, diplomatic sources suggest both nations are exploring dialogue to resolve the dispute. The African Union has called for restraint, urging cooperation to prevent further escalation. The situation remains fluid, with significant implications for regional security and international relations. Now, joining us from our Abuja studio for a chat on the diplomatic role between Nigeria and the Republic of Niger is Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Bayes University, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My pleasure.
Let's start by x-raying the source or the origin of this accusation or allegations coming from the Republic of Niger. Could it be tied to the intervention of ECOWAS, which of course is chaired by President Tinubu when the military coup took place in Niger in 2003? Could it be tied to that intervention that happened back then and the sanctions that followed?
Of course, definitely it cannot be too far from myth. And of course, you can also add the fact that the junta in Niger, alongside the one in Mali and Burkina Faso, are illegitimate. They are trying to gain some moral ground, to justify their stay in power, to ward off ECOWAS intervention, asking them to democratize, and of course to make themselves look good in the eyes of the global community. And if they have to do that, they are ready punching back. Will definitely be Nigeria, being the biggest, the largest, the most influential country in the sub-region. And against the background, like you rightly said, of our president chairing ECOWAS, and in addition to the threat, earlier on by ECOWAS, to get them to democratize forcefully, even though ECOWAS retracted. As all those things had created some crisis of confidence, prior. And it was just okay. In addition to, do not forget, the increasing or the new kind of friendship, evolving between Nigeria and France, coming at a time Nigeria was exiting France from its territory. So all these things will add up, or rather added up, to make the president of Niger, or the junta in Niger, to make that kind of laughable, practically idiotic, and of course, implausible accusation. We know why they did this, but overall, we also know that Nigeria is a big brother, an influential country in the sub-region. We do not necessarily have to come to their level, we need to just keep the focus, insisting on the need for them to democratize, because with their continuous intransigence, forming an alliance, and of course the fear that some other military-infested states might follow their line, it is important for us to be elevated above their provocations, so that we can manage the campaign, subtle or overt, the campaign for democratization on a sustainable basis, as the case could be.
Democratization. These allegations by Nigerian authorities, do you think it's a sign of lack of confidence on their own ability to maintain power, despite the fact that their presence is an aberration?
Yeah, definitely I agree with you, Nii. No doubt, every military regime, it's likely to have that innate anxiety, considering that, the ascension is illegal, the alleged ascension is impromptu, gung-ho, something that is not processual, as you will imagine of a democratic process where there's election, and of course, things are constitutional. Now we have systems, in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, that are not predictable. There could be implosion anytime. We're not wishing that it happens, but it could actually happen. Remember, I read somewhere recently that even in Burkina Faso, the government itself is saying that they've had 17 coup attempts, in the short time the guy has been in power. So this is the character of a military regime, especially in a fragmented entity like the entities that we're talking about, where there are different interests, around ethnicity, around religion, around prebendalism, and around, the primitive quest, for power. These things cannot be ruled out, and it's just, after all, a show of ego, who has the greatest, the bigger advantage, and sometimes once they just realize that there's an opportunity somewhere, they can strike. And that's why, to use your word, it will remain an aberration. Globally, military regimes, is largely declining. People are looking for integration, governments that are involving, governments that are representative, considering the innate needs of the human being, of the citizens that governments wants to rule, or to govern, to have their voice heard. And one system that engenders that is democracy. And governments around the world, no matter how far they are from democracy, in terms of classification, in terms of framework, often have the element of representation, which is also close to democracy. But military regime, unfortunately, is very far from it, very, very dictatorial, no doubt, because the constitution is not there. Everything is just at the whims and caprices hardly consultative. And when governments are hardly consultative, it's inimical to good governance, because oftentimes you just ride roughshod on the whims of the people. And of course, it's also far from godliness, and that's why civilization, loads the average military regime, as the case could be.
By Niger's military leader coming on the backdrop of President Tinubu's persistent visit, and you have also alluded to the fact that there is a building relationship between Nigeria and France. And, there are reports that President Tinubu has had like 5 visits to France since he took office in 2023. Do you think that there's a need for the president to maybe balance his relationship with France and also with our African neighbor, Niger?
Well, without holding brief for Nigeria's president, I also know that Nigeria is a sovereign state, and we have our status, and we have an influence in Africa. And beyond that, we also have some organic characteristics, that, put us on a higher pedestal, than some countries that are already complaining about what our president is doing and what he's not doing. I also know that some of those visits are actually private. The one that is official is just one, and of course there are guidelines, that will shape and determine the kind of relationship and activity that will transpire in Nigeria's bilateral relationship with France. And one of the things that I do know that may never happen, especially in a sensitive country like ours, if for our country is for Nigeria to covertly or overtly sponsor any kind of terrorism, against another country, considering our shared history, our shared heritage, and our shared culture. Do not forget that Mali, played host to one of the most illustrious empires, in Africa, something we often refer to in history, the Mali Empire. It was part of the Songhai Empire, and the Kanem Borno Empire that was domiciled in Kanuri also had outlets in Mali. Remember also, Timbuktu is one of the heritages of Africa, and of course, famous for its architectural masterpieces, resident in Mali, So all these things bind us together. So I don't see how we can be destructive for Nigeria in all its glory, in all its influence, now deteriorating, declining to the state where it will want to upstage, the peace of another country, a nearby country from that matter, with which we have contiguous border. And of course, do not forget, we're also dealing with our own terrorism crisis. We're dealing with insurgency, kidnapping, banditry, and all of that. That's quite a handful. So if we have not even been able to successfully deal with that, why on earth should we think about orchestrating these criminal acts in another country? And in Niger Republic, for that matter, considering our shared history, which I've tried to highlight. And do not forget, only in the previous regime, we had collaborations, at the level of support, where our former president or the former government was interested in helping them. We had railway going as far as their capital, in N'Djamena. So, I mean, why should we be that stupid, if I may use that primitive word, to now begin to engender crisis in their country? That's why I can just regard the comment by their president accusing Nigeria as an idle talk, one that is simply geared towards giving them some moral ground to justify their continual stay in power, their illegal stay in power. But it's okay also that Nigeria has presented several rebuttals, deniers. Well, I do not also think that we can go beyond that because we are a big brother. It will remain a diplomatic row that will be resolved peacefully. There's nothing more we can do. We cannot come down to their level, but I also know that at some point it will be resolved. Because even the alliance that they are fostering among themselves is not an alliance that is sustainable, because it's an alliance that is fragile. If, for instance, one of them democratizes, of course, you expect that any one of them at any point in time, once they democratize, will be looking forward to coming back to ECOWAS. They've only exited ECOWAS, and they're also throwing darts at our neighboring presidents only because, they want to be distanced from us, maybe emotionally and somewhat physically as well. But these are not sustainable tactics. They are underhand tactics that we should not dignify. We should rather remain elevated as a country, realizing that these are just, idlers, looking for legitimacy.
Professor, now, looking at other perspectives here, deposed President Bazoum is still under the custody of the current junta in Niger, and he is widely seen as the legitimate ruler of the Niger regarding the AU and, of course, the international community as well. Do you think he'll be used at some point as a bargaining chip, in the current scenario, or his time has passed regarding their stay in power, you think?
I'm not going to take anything away from these fellows, because they're obviously very, very desperate. And when they find themselves in this situation, they can throw anything in the mix, And of course, first of all, you can imagine that it's just a reminder of the dark days of military rule in this country, where somebody will take power and we will keep the president that he has overthrown in Gaul, for months or even years on end. I remember President Shehu Shagari suffered it to some extent. Who was that again? A couple of other presidents overthrown, also suffered it. Those are things that offend the human democratic sensibilities. And for us to be having it again in the 21st century through the instrument of General Chiani, it's unbecoming, and that's something that we should not tolerate, something that even though they come with different kinds of blackmail, something that we should not cave into, because it's a primitive pressure tactics. We are concerned about the safety of the former president, and I do not expect ECOWAS, the African Union, or even any other global body for that matter, to renege, in asking for the safety of that former president, because he didn't do anything wrong. All he was trying to do, was to be compliant with good governance. And there has never been any guarantee in history that a guarantee. Examples in history where we can contextually argue that military regimes, have been better than than civilian administration in terms of service delivery, in terms of achievement, and every other thing, irrespective of, the ability to maintain peace and security. But oftentimes we know that when they now come into government, that noble, dignifying role, attention is taken from it, and their mindset, which is simply the management of conflict and such other things, when transported into governance, requires some kind of retweaking. And in trying to retweak it, of course, there are derailments here and there, and becomes inimical, to good nature. So if Chiani is trying to get into some other tactics, like using the life of the former president, I don't think he's going to go far as well. It's just a matter of time before good reign over evil.
I'd like to know what you think are the implications of these allegations, especially when you look at regional stability within the economic community of West African states, and also looking at that allegation that Nigeria established Lakorawa headquarters in Sokoto. What implications do you think all of these allegations have on regional stability?
Yeah, the allegations are definitely unfortunate because this is a time where we need cross-country cooperation, considering the role Niger has been playing, Chad, and all of that, in their collaborations to help us deal with insurgency. And remembering again, that those countries are out, for the infiltration of small and light arms, with occurrences in North Africa and the Sahel. So we need that collaboration. And that's why over the years we've had these multinational joint task forces, that have been very helpful, sometimes with Nigeria being at the lead. But if we have a president of a major country in the matrix like Niger accusing us, it does a lot of damage to trust, to crisis of confidence, to confidence, and to our ability to not to generate bad blood, to invest faith in the process. That's why it's concerning. And that's why I think that Nigerian government, is going for broke, trying to deny it. And in doing so, the argument here is that it should be sustained, considering the role of Nigeria's president in ECOWAS as a leader. And as a leader, your position, whether you like it or not, is to take all kinds of rubbish, all kinds of darts, But the challenge before a leader is to rise above those darts, those rubbish, as the case could be, and make some meanings out of it, so that even if you are not appreciated in the present, in the future, you will definitely be appreciated. So at the global international level, that's what we expect Nigerian president to do, and hoping that the intransigence of these countries, we thought at some point, and of course they will democratize, consequent upon their ability to eventually see reason.
At the end of the day, democracy prevails. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Dean School of Postgraduate Studies, Beige University, would like to thank you for your thoughts on those issues. Good to have you with us.